The contractor's voice reverberated through the chilly basement, startling me as I peered into the depths of our old home. "Ma'am, you might want to take a look at this." There, half buried behind plaster and support beams, was a safe I had never seen before, its existence a mystery woven into the very foundation of my marriage. Panic surged through me, a visceral reaction fueled by equal parts curiosity and dread. 30 years I had spent with Peter, convinced we had no secrets, no ghosts hovering over us. But this? This was something else entirely. Peter appeared at the top of the stairs, concern etched into the lines of his face. "What's going on?" His voice was steady, but I could see his hands trembling slightly as he descended. My own heart pounded in my chest, a violent percussion of suspicion and betrayal. "A safe," I said, pointing towards the steel door that was slightly ajar, a corner of yellowed paper protruding ominously. "How long has this been here?" He paused, visibly taken aback. Peter's eyes flickered down to the exposed safe, his expression a mingling of surprise and fear. "I didn't know," he whispered, yet the hesitation in his voice was palpable, unsettling. I knelt down, hands shaking as I pulled the door further open. The safe exhaled decades of dust and secrecy, revealing documents, photographs, and a scattered array of items that seemed oddly sentimental. "Why didn't you tell me about this?" My voice was strained, teetering on the edge of an accusation. But underlying my question was a desperate plea for reassurance, for this to be a misunderstanding. Peter's response was a silent turmoil, his eyes locked onto mine, silently pleading for understanding. But what was there to understand? Had everything between us been a mirage, carefully constructed to shield me from some unspeakable truth? I pulled out the papers carefully, each brittle page a piece of the past that was now forcing its way into the present. And as I began to read, the lines formed a jagged edge in my mind, each word an incision that cut through the fabric of our shared life. The first document was a marriage certificate, not ours, but Peter's. Dated a year before we'd ever met. Every synapse in my brain screamed disbelief, even as the evidence lay in my very hands. There was another wife, another life I had been oblivious to. "No," I gasped, the shock morphing into an unbridled anger. "How could you? How could you keep this from me?" Peter reached out, his hands a reluctant bridge between us that I didn't want to cross. "It was over before we met," he insisted, voice cracking under the weight of his lie. "She left years ago, it meant nothing." His words felt hollow, echoing against the walls of a reality I no longer recognized. I turned away, needing space to fathom the enormity of his betrayal, forcing myself to continue digging through the detritus of his secrets. Amid the papers, a faded photo caught my eye. A little girl with Peter's unmistakable smile. My breath hitched. Not only had I discovered another wife, but a child too. A daughter I had never known about, trapped in a time capsule of forgotten obligations. Peter's silence spoke volumes, his regret was palpable now, a living entity between us, but it did little to quell the storm brewing within me. Years of deception lay bare, challenging the very foundation of our vows. I pressed further, each revelation more heart-wrenching than the last. Love letters, written by a hand that had once been mine alone. A handwritten will revealing financial arrangements, assets hidden away in accounts I knew nothing about. Every page was a new affront, every admission a nail driven deeper into the coffin of our marriage. I felt the heat of tears burning paths down my cheeks, but I refused to let him see the depths of my vulnerability. Finally, unable to bear the weight of unspoken words anymore, I turned to Peter. His face was a portrait of anguish, yet there was a defiance in his eyes, a stubborn refusal to acknowledge the reality of his actions. "Why?" I asked, my voice a fragile whisper, desperate for answers that might never come. "Why hide from me?" "I was ashamed," he confessed, his voice barely audible. "I didn't want you to see me like this." Betrayal and compassion warred within me, but the breach in our trust was cavernous, threatening to swallow us whole. It was the first step of a journey I never wanted to take, a path fraught with decisions that would lead to redemption or retribution. But one thing was certain: whatever came next, it would be on my terms. I stood there, clutching a handful of documents, their edges cutting into my skin, grounding me in the painful reality that had become my life. Each piece of paper felt like a betrayal in my hands, each sentence a testament to a life so intricately built on deceit. Peter's words lingered in the air, an apology mingled with fear and uncertainty. Ashamed? I repeated, incredulous. My voice wavered, but I held his gaze with a strength I didn't quite feel. You should have been ashamed of the lies, not the truth. This is unforgivable, Peter. He moved closer, desperation etched across his face. Linda, please, it was over long ago. I never wanted you to find out this way. I thought I could lock away that part of me forever. My anger bubbled to the surface, restless and fiery. You had no right to decide that for me, I snapped. Our marriage was built on love, not illusions. How could you pretend this was a thing of the past when it's so deeply embedded in our present? Peter's shoulders sagged, the weight of his secrets finally settling upon him like a cloak of remorse. He ran a hand through his graying hair, once a symbol of the years we shared, now just another reminder of time wasted on half-truths. You and I, we were real, he insisted, his eyes imploring me to believe him. Everything we built together, it was genuine. But I didn't know how to bring this into our life without losing you. His words washed over me, but the rift inside my heart only widened. I turned away, unable to look at him without seeing the shadows of his past pressing down on us. Silence stretched between us, as thick as the dusty air in the basement, laden with unsaid words and unvoiced fears. I turned back toward the safe, staring at its contents as if they would provide me with the answers I so desperately needed. My fingers brushed over more letters, each one a relic of his hidden life. They were proof of another family, another set of obligations I had never been part of. I felt the sting of jealousy and betrayal merge into a single, searing pain deep within my chest. How could you just erase them? I asked, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. Your daughter, she's still out there, without a father all these years. And now I find out like this. Peter's face crumpled, the weight of my accusations crushing him. She was better off without me, he said finally, his voice thick with regret. I was a mess back then, Linda. I thought I was doing what was best for everyone. I shook my head, bitterness lacing my tone. You robbed her of the chance to know who you are. You robbed me of the truth. Every milestone we celebrated, every decision we made, it was built on a lie. That's not something you can just brush away, Peter. He reached for my hand, but I pulled back, the distance between us a chasm I wasn't ready to bridge. I needed time to think, to figure out what this revelation meant for us, for me. In a voice barely above a whisper, I said, I need some air. I need to think. Peter nodded, the defeat in his posture evident. Take whatever time you need, he murmured, and for a brief moment, I saw the man I had fallen in love with, the man who had shared so much of my life. I ascended the stairs, leaving Peter behind, his figure a shadow of the person I thought I knew. Outside, the crisp autumn air filled my lungs, its freshness a stark contrast to the suffocating atmosphere of the basement. The leaves crunched beneath my feet as I walked aimlessly, my mind a whirlwind of emotions, each one more overwhelming than the last. Everywhere I looked, memories of our life together assaulted me, their sweetness now tinged with a bitter aftertaste. The swing on the porch where we spent warm summer evenings, the garden we tended together, it all felt tainted, touched by the specter of what I now knew. I recalled our wedding day, the way Peter had looked at me, full of promises and potential. Had he been thinking of his other life even then? Had every pledge of love been shadowed by thoughts of a daughter who never knew her father's love? As I wondered, the enormity of the situation began to settle in, the ramifications of Peter's deceit branching out in countless directions. Our finances, our future plans, everything seemed uncertain now. I felt adrift, unmoored from the stability I once took for granted. I thought of the other woman, this ghost of Peter's past who had lived in the periphery of our marriage all this time. What was she like? What had happened to their marriage? Was she aware of me? And their daughter, did she know about her father's new life, tucked away in a little town miles away? The questions circled endlessly, consuming me. I couldn't pretend that everything would be okay, not when the foundation of my life had been shattered so violently. As hurt and betrayal warred within me, I knew I had decisions to make. Back home, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the lawn. I paused, contemplating the house that had been my sanctuary, now transformed into a labyrinth of secrets. It was time to confront the reality of my situation, to decide whether forgiveness was in my heart or if vengeance was the path I needed to tread to find peace. But first, I needed to know more. I needed to find out what led Peter to hide so much of himself from me, and what that meant for the road ahead. With newfound determination, I turned back towards the house. The journey wasn't over, and I was far from ready to determine my course, but I knew one thing: I would not be silent. The truth had been locked away for too long, and it was time to unleash the consequences. The door creaked open as I returned inside, the weight of the upcoming confrontation heavy on my shoulders. I found Peter still in the basement, sitting with his back against the wall, head in his hands. The sight of him, so broken, tugged at a part of me that still remembered our love. Yet the sting of his betrayal was fresh, raw. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady. "And this time, I'm going to ask the questions." Peter looked up, his eyes red-rimmed yet filled with a glimmer of hope. "I'll tell you everything," he promised, "no more lies." I nodded, taking a seat across from him. We sat in the dim light of the basement, the contents of the safe scattered around us like the remnants of a shattered life. There was so much I couldn't forgive, so much I couldn't forget, but here, amidst the debris of our marriage, it was time for the truth to finally come into the light. Peter took a deep breath, his gaze meeting mine with a mixture of resolve and reluctance. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy with unspoken truths. "Before you, Linda," he started, his voice low and gravelly, "I was a different man. I thought I could outrun my mistakes, start fresh. But it seems like they've finally caught up with me." I nodded, urging him to continue, the weight of his confession pressing down on both of us. "Her name was Julia," he said, his eyes distant as if conjuring her image from the depths of his memory. "She was my first love. We were young, and everything seemed possible. But reality has a way of crashing down on youthful dreams." "What happened?" I asked, wanting to understand how everything had spiraled out of control. Peter's gaze shifted to the floor, his hands twisting together in a dance of unease. "We rushed into things: marriage, a child before we were ready. I wasn't a good husband, Linda. I got involved with the wrong crowd, made some bad decisions. Julia tried to hold us together, but eventually, she had enough." "And the child?" I pressed, my heart heavy with the thought of an innocent caught in the crossfire of adult failings. "Emily." His voice softened at her name, a hint of the paternal affection he had once felt. "She was about 6 when Julia left, took her to Europe to start over. I let them go, thinking they deserved better than what I could offer. I tried to keep in touch, but my life was a mess, and I didn't want to pull them back into it." I absorbed his words, trying to reconcile the man before me with the choices he had made. "And then you met me," I said softly, the timeline finally beginning to make sense. Peter nodded. "You were my chance at redemption, Linda. I was trying to be better, to leave that part of my life behind. But you never told me," I said, the betrayal sharp against the backdrop of empathy that dared to creep in. "You never trusted me with this part of you. I was scared of losing you, scared you'd see me as that man, a failure who couldn't even hold on to his family," he admitted, his voice raw with emotion. "Every marriage has challenges, Peter," I said, my tone firm. "But trust isn't something you can hide away and hope it doesn't matter. It's everything." The weight of the truth settled in the room, a tangible presence as we both grappled with what it meant for our future. I wanted to lash out, to make him feel the pain his deceit had caused, but more than that, I wanted clarity, a path forward amidst the wreckage. "What do you want now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. What can we salvage from this? Peter met my gaze, his eyes pleading. You, us. I want to fight for our marriage, Linda. I know I don't deserve another chance, but if there's any way you can find it in your heart to forgive me. Forgiveness isn't just about you, Peter, I interrupted, the frustration laced with melancholy. It's about me finding a way to move past this, but it isn't something you can demand or expect. I know, he replied, his voice a somber acknowledgement of the damage done. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. But first, I need to make things right with Emily. She deserves that much. His words surprised me, a hint of the man I'd hoped he was shining through. Could I stand in the way of that, when it was clear Emily had been the unintended casualty of our tangled lives? Then start there, I said, determination edging into my tone. Write to her, apologize. Lay your cards on the table and see if she's willing to let you back into her life. But understand, Peter, this isn't a quick fix. Trust will take time to rebuild, both with her and with me. Peter nodded, a small flicker of hope lighting his features. I'll write to her tonight, he promised. For a moment, we sat in silence, the enormity of the task ahead dawning on us both. The realization that our lives had irrevocably changed settled over us like a blanket, comforting yet constricting. What about Julia? I asked, knowing the question had to be broached. Does she know about us? Peter shook his head. We haven't spoken in years. I doubt she knows where I am now, or even cares to. The thought of reaching out to a woman I never knew existed before today was daunting, but I had to consider the possibility. If this was to be resolved, honesty had to stretch its arms to encompass everyone involved. Maybe you should reach out to her, too, I suggested, hesitantly. Not as a partner, but as a co-parent. Emily deserves transparency from both her parents. Peter hesitated, the idea clearly overwhelming. I'll think about it, he said finally, a tentative agreement. There was a long road ahead, fraught with uncertainty and the potential for further heartache. But if Peter was willing to face the ghosts of his past, maybe there was hope yet for healing. I rose to my feet, the fatigue of the day settling into my bones. I need some space, I said, my voice gentle yet resolute. I'll be staying with my sister for a few days. Give me some time to process all of this. He nodded, understanding implicit in the small gesture. Take all the time you need. I'll be here, ready to talk whenever you are. As I made my way out of the basement, I glanced back one last time, seeing the uncertainty etched into Peter's features, mirrored in my own heart. I wanted to believe in redemption, both his and mine, but the path was steep, and I wasn't sure if we or our marriage could withstand the climb. The night air wrapped around me as I stepped outside again, seeking solace in the solitude. The quiet was comforting, wrapping me in a cocoon of contemplation as I considered everything I had learned, everything I still needed to decide. Peter's secrets had shifted the axis of my world, but perhaps now, with the truth finally out, there was a chance to rebuild. But that was a decision for another day. For now, I needed the balm of time and distance to guide me toward the future I wanted to shape. With a heavy heart and a mind full of unanswered questions, I drove away, my sister's welcoming embrace and the promise of understanding on the horizon. The path was uncertain, but somewhere in the darkness, I hoped to find a flicker of light guiding the way forward. The drive to my sister's house was a blur. Trees and streetlights whipped past, mere shadows in the periphery of my vision as my mind replayed the events of the day with relentless persistence. My sister, Karen, awaited me, a beacon of comfort and strength in this new reality I found myself navigating. Her home was warm and inviting, the scent of lavender wafting through the air as she embraced me in the doorway. It was a hug that spoke volumes: understanding, empathy, and a steadfast promise of support. "Linda, what's happened?" she asked softly, leading me to the kitchen table, where a pot of chamomile tea steamed invitingly. I held the warmth of the mug in my hands, grounding myself before releasing the floodgates. I recounted everything: the hidden safe, Peter's confession, the daughter I never knew existed. Karen listened intently, her expression shifting from shock to anger, and finally, to a compassionate sadness as she absorbed the full scope of Peter's betrayal and my resultant turmoil. "You must feel so lost," Karen said, reaching across the table to grasp my hand. "I do, but mostly, I feel deceived," I admitted, a fresh wave of emotions coursing through me. "I'm trying to figure out what happens next. Can I forgive him, knowing how deep his lies went?" Karen shook her head, a soft sigh escaping her lips. "Forgiveness is a process, Linda. It's not just about Peter, this is about you, reclaiming your sense of trust and peace, whether with or without him." Her words resonated, echoing the internal debate that had raged within me since the discovery of the safe. I spent the night in the guest room, unable to find solace in sleep. Instead, I watched the first light of dawn creep through the window, a symbolic gesture of hope and new beginnings. 3 days passed in much the same manner. Small tasks filled my time, but my mind never strayed far from the dilemma at hand. I received a text from Peter after 2 days, a simple message that read, "I've written to Emily. I hope she'll respond." The words provided a glimmer of comfort, a sign that perhaps Peter was truly intent on facing his past and atoning for his mistakes. It was a decision that wouldn't instantly mend things between us, but it was a start. On the 4th day, sitting in Karen's backyard, I realized that my anger had started to morph into something else, a tentative acceptance of the situation. It was then that I knew it was time to return home, confront Peter, and decide the next steps in our life together or apart. Karen drove me back to our house, her presence a constant reminder that I wasn't alone in this journey. As I stepped inside, I was greeted by silence, the home enveloped in a stillness that belied the tension of recent days. Peter appeared in the living room, looking haggard and more vulnerable than I'd ever seen him. He took a tentative step forward. "Linda, I'm here to talk, Peter," I interjected gently, not wanting the conversation to spiral into apologies and accusations. "I'm here because I need clarity, and we need to decide what happens now." He nodded, leading me to the couch. There was a pause, a moment suspended in time as each of us gathered our thoughts. "I got a response from Emily," Peter said quietly, a note of hope threading through the fatigue in his voice. "She said she wants to meet. She's angry, confused, but she's willing to listen." "That's good," I said, meaning it. "She deserves to know her father." "But what about us, Peter? How do we move forward from here?" His eyes met mine, filled with a sincerity that hadn't been there before. "I want to move forward together, Linda, if you can find it in your heart to let me try and win back your trust." I let his words sink in, weighing them against the hurt he had caused. Trust was a fragile thing, and I knew rebuilding it would take time and effort from both of us. "I'm willing to try, but we need a clean slate," I said, the determination in my voice surprising even me. "No more secrets. We need to communicate openly, and you need to prove that you're committed to being part of both mine and Emily's lives." Peter nodded, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "I will. I promise to be the husband and father I should have been all along." It was a promise that would require action, not just words, but for the first time in days, I allowed myself a glimmer of hope, a tentative step toward healing. In the coming months, Peter and I worked through our issues with the help of couples therapy, each session a painful but necessary peeling back of layers to understand and forgive not just Peter's past, but the impact it had on our present. There were days when the weight of it all felt unbearable, but with each difficult conversation, with each gesture of rebuilding, we edged closer to a place of understanding. Peter met Emily, and though their first meeting was fraught with the tension of years lost, there were shared tears and tentative smiles beginning. I joined them for their second meeting, feeling like an outsider at first, but slowly finding my place in what felt like an emerging family. Together, we navigated birthdays, holidays, and quiet evenings at home, each day a new testament to our commitment to one another. It wasn't easy, and there were setbacks, moments when old fears and insecurities threatened to pull us back into the darkness. But with each challenge, we emerged stronger, more resolute in our determination to heal as individuals and as a family. As spring melted into summer, I found myself sitting in the garden Peter and I had tended for years, a small haven that had weathered the storms of our lives. I watched him and Emily plant new bulbs together, their laughter lifting into the warm breeze, a harmonious note in the symphony of life. I realized then that forgiveness, like love, was a choice, a decision to embrace vulnerability and trust in the possibility of transformation. Peter had shattered my trust, but in the aftermath of chaos, he had offered me something more valuable: honesty, and a sustained effort at redemption. There was no denying the scars left by his betrayal, but there was also no denying the joy of watching him repair his relationship with his daughter, or the quiet comfort of rebuilding our marriage on a foundation of trust and truth. In the end, it wasn't about the past we couldn't change, it was about the future we could shape together. A future that, despite the pain, promised hope, resilience, and the enduring power of love. As I joined them in the garden, kneeling in the fertile earth, I felt a sense of peace settle around me. This was our new beginning, a testament to the strength it took to face the past and the courage to embrace what lay ahead, together.